It was a late evening in the city, the kind of evening when most people hurried home to their warm houses and waiting families. The tall glass buildings reflected the last of the sun, and the streets were glowing under the orange streetlights. Expensive cars rolled by, carrying men and women who had finished their day's work. Among them was Mr. Arjun Malhotra, a well-known CEO, respected for his sharp mind, but also feared for his cold, distant nature. He had built his empire on discipline and power, and very few people ever saw him smile. That night, Arjun left his office later than usual. His driver opened the door of the sleek black car, but Arjun waved his hand. He wanted to walk a little. It was unusual for him, he rarely stepped out without reason. But something in the cool night breeze made him pause. He loosened his tie, stretched his shoulders, and decided to take a slow walk down the road before getting into the car. The streets were quieter here, just a few blocks away from the busiest part of the city. A faint sound reached his ears. It wasn't loud, just a soft shuffle, like small feet dragging on the ground. He almost ignored it, but then he saw her. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, stood a few steps away from the sidewalk. Her clothes were worn, not dirty but clearly old. Her thin arms hugged her stomach as though she were hungry, yet her eyes were steady. Unlike the usual children who stretched out their hands to beg, she didn't say anything at first. She just looked at him, her eyes shining under the dim light of a flickering lamp. Arjun slowed down. He had no habit of entertaining strangers, especially not children on the street. His world was meetings, deals, and numbers, not these random encounters. Still, there was something about her silence that drew his attention. He stopped a few feet away. "Why are you standing here?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. The little girl shifted on her feet. She looked at him, then looked down at the ground. For a moment, she seemed too shy to speak. Then, in a very soft voice, she whispered, "Sir, she's too weak to beg." Arjun frowned. He wasn't sure if he had heard her correctly. "What did you say?" The girl raised her head slightly, her small lips trembling. "My sister, she's too weak to beg," she repeated, her tone carrying a mixture of innocence and quiet desperation. The words struck him oddly. He had heard children ask for money, food, or help before. But never had he heard someone say it like this. Not for herself, but for someone else. He took a careful step closer. "Where is your sister?" he asked. The girl's eyes darted toward the corner of the street. There, parked under a large tree, stood an old, battered car. Its paint was peeling, and its windows were cracked. She pointed to it but didn't move at first. Her tiny hand trembled slightly as she lifted it. Arjun's curiosity deepened. Something inside him told him to ignore it and continue walking. After all, he was a busy man. He didn't owe explanations or help to strangers. Yet his feet refused to move away. "Show me," he said quietly. The girl nodded. She walked slowly, her small slippers scraping the ground. Every few steps, she looked back to see if he was following. Arjun, with his tall figure and expensive suit, felt strangely out of place walking behind this fragile little child. When they reached the car, she hesitated again. Her fingers touched the rusty trunk, but she didn't open it right away. She looked up at him nervously, as though unsure if she should reveal what was inside. "Go on," Arjun encouraged, his voice softer now. Her hands were small, but with effort, she pressed the latch. The trunk creaked as it lifted slightly. A faint draft of cool air slipped out, and inside, in the dim shadows, Arjun could make out a small figure curled up. It was another little girl, younger than the first, lying motionless. Her skin looked pale, her eyes closed, and her breathing was faint but steady. Arjun froze where he stood. His chest felt tight for a reason he couldn't immediately understand. The older sister looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She hasn't eaten since yesterday. I don't know what else to do, she whispered. For a long moment, the world seemed to stand still. The sounds of the city, the rush of passing cars, even the wind, all of it faded. Arjun only saw the fragile child in the trunk and the desperate, pleading eyes of her sister. Arjun stood frozen, staring into the open trunk. The city lights blinked in the distance, but his attention was fixed only on the frail little body lying there. The girl's face was thin, her lips slightly parted, and her breathing so shallow that he had to look closely to be sure she was alive. For a man who had faced boardroom battles and handled billion-dollar deals, this was different. This was not a challenge of numbers or strategies, it was raw, human, and painfully real. He felt an unusual heaviness inside his chest. He wanted to say something, but words didn't come easily. The older girl, still standing beside him, broke the silence. "She's my sister," she said softly. "Her name is Mira. She hasn't woken up since morning. I tried to wake her, but she is too tired." Her little voice shook, but there was a surprising strength in it. She was holding back her tears, as if she knew she had to be strong for her younger sister. Arjun finally found his voice. "How long has she been like this?" The girl lowered her head, as if embarrassed by her answer. "Since yesterday night. We had nothing to eat. I thought maybe she was just tired, so I let her sleep. But today she didn't open her eyes properly. I was scared." Arjun glanced again at the small figure inside the trunk. He had never seen something like this up close. His life was filled with luxury hotels, fine dining, and private jets. Hunger, for him, was only a word in a dictionary, not a reality he had lived with. And yet, standing here, he could almost feel the sharp pangs of it through this little girl's words. "Why here? Why in a car trunk?" he asked, his tone unintentionally stern. The girl quickly explained, afraid he might misunderstand. "It's safer here. We don't have a home. People tell us to go away when we sit near their shops. Some people shout, some even push us. I didn't want anyone to hurt Mira. This car doesn't move anymore, so I made her rest inside. I thought it would keep her safe from the cold wind." Her words were simple, yet they pierced deeper than any harsh truth Arjun had heard before. She wasn't asking for sympathy, she was explaining, with a kind of quiet dignity. Arjun pressed his lips together. His heart was unsettled, but his mind was still searching for logic. "Where are your parents?" he asked carefully. The girl hesitated. Then, in a faint voice, she said, "We don't have them anymore." Arjun didn't press further. Something about the way she said it told him that the story behind those words was too heavy for such a young child to carry. The little girl, gathering courage, finally looked him straight in the eyes. "Sir, you are rich, aren't you? People like you can buy food anytime. Can you please give me something for my sister? Not for me. Just for her." Her request was so small, yet it held a world of emotion. She wasn't begging for herself, and she wasn't even asking for money. She just wanted her sister to have the strength to open her eyes again. Arjun's throat felt tight. He had faced investors who demanded millions from him and handled them without blinking. But this tiny request, it shook him in a way he didn't expect. He nodded slowly. "Wait here," he said, his voice quieter than usual. He pulled out his phone and dialed his driver. Within minutes, the sleek black car pulled up. The driver, confused to see his boss standing beside an old broken vehicle with two children, stepped out quickly. "Sir," he asked, unsure. Arjun's eyes didn't leave the trunk. "Bring the water bottle," he ordered softly. The driver hurried and returned with a chilled bottle from the car. Arjun crouched down beside the trunk, his expensive suit brushing against the dust of the old car. Carefully, he unscrewed the cap and turned to the older sister. "What's your name?" "My name is Anaya," she replied, standing a little taller even though her shoulders were tired. "Anaya," Arjun said gently, "help me. We need to make your sister drink some water." Anaya nodded quickly. She knelt beside him and touched Mira's cheek. "Mira, wake up. Please, there's water now." With effort, the younger girl's eyelids fluttered, just barely. She made a faint sound, almost like a sigh. Arjun tilted the bottle carefully, pouring a few drops into her mouth. At first, it seemed she might not respond, but slowly, her throat moved, swallowing. Anaya's face lit up with relief. "She drank. She drank, sir." Arjun exhaled as though he had been holding his breath. It was such a small thing, a few sips of water, but it felt like a victory. The driver, still confused, asked quietly, "Sir, should I call someone?" "Maybe." Arjun raised a hand to silence him. His mind was already racing. He couldn't just leave them here. He knew that much. Yet a strange uncertainty lingered. Why did he feel responsible? Why couldn't he simply walk away, as he would have on any other day? He looked at Anaya again. Her eyes were watching him, full of hope, yet still cautious. She didn't trust the world easily, but something in her gaze told him she wanted to trust him. "Anaya," he said slowly, "you did the right thing by protecting your sister. But she needs more than water. She needs food, and rest, and care." Anaya bit her lip. "I know, sir. But I didn't know who to ask. Everyone turns their face away. You stopped to listen. That is why I showed you." The honesty in her words moved him. She had chosen him, a stranger, because for once someone hadn't rushed past her. Arjun stood up, his tall frame casting a shadow over the broken car. "We're taking her with us," he decided firmly. Anaya's eyes widened. "With you?" "Yes," he replied. "To a hospital. She needs help now." For a moment, fear flickered across her face. "Will they allow us?" "We don't have money. Hospitals, they don't listen if we can't pay." Arjun looked at her directly. "Don't worry about that. I will take care of it." Anaya blinked in surprise. She didn't fully understand who this man was or how much power he carried, but his voice carried a promise she wanted to believe in. Arjun turned to his driver. "Help me carry the girl carefully. We don't want to hurt her." The driver hesitated only for a second before nodding. Gently, Arjun lifted Mira in his own arms. She was so light, it shocked him. It felt as if he were carrying only bones wrapped in skin and a fragile breath of life. Something inside him stirred a memory he couldn't fully grasp, something from his own childhood perhaps, buried deep under years of ambition. He walked toward his car, holding Mira close. Anaya followed, her small footsteps quick, as if afraid he might change his mind. When they reached the car, Arjun opened the door himself and placed Mira carefully on the back seat. Anaya climbed in beside her, immediately holding her sister's hand. As the car pulled away from the street, Arjun glanced once more at the broken vehicle they were leaving behind. It was just an old car to most people, but for these children, it had been a shelter, a place of safety in a world that gave them none. The thought left a strange ache in his heart. He sat in silence, watching Anaya stroke her sister's forehead gently, whispering words of comfort. And for the first time in years, Arjun Malhotra felt that his world once built entirely on success and control was about to change in ways he could not yet imagine. The car moved quickly through the streets, its headlights cutting through the night. Inside, silence filled the space, but it wasn't an empty silence, it was heavy with worry, hope, and unspoken questions. Arjun sat upright, his hands resting on his knees. He had sat in this car countless times before, usually going to meetings, events, or his mansion. But tonight felt different. The leather seats, the dim glow of the dashboard, the quiet hum of the engine, all of it seemed unfamiliar because of who was sitting with him. On the back seat, Anaya held her sister's hand tightly, whispering softly. "Mira, we're going somewhere safe now. Don't be afraid. Please wake up soon." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were shining with tears she didn't want to let fall. Arjun kept watching through the rear-view mirror. The older sister's care, her tiny strength, and her endless patience struck him deeply. He wondered how a child could carry so much responsibility, when adults often failed in the same role. The driver cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, which hospital should I take them to?" Arjun didn't answer immediately. He thought for a moment, then gave the name of a private hospital, one of the best in the city. The driver's eyes widened slightly in the mirror. That hospital was known for its luxury services and high costs. But Arjun didn't care. For the first time, the question of money felt irrelevant. When they arrived, nurses rushed forward as soon as they saw the child being carried. Arjun spoke quickly, his usual commanding tone returning. "Arrange for immediate checkup. She's weak and needs care." The nurses nodded and took Mira carefully onto a stretcher. Anaya followed closely, holding onto her sister's small hand until she had to let go. Her eyes darted nervously around the white walls and bright lights of the hospital. Everything felt too clean, too large, too distant from her world. Arjun noticed her fear and bent slightly to speak in a calm voice. "It's all right, Anaya. They are helping your sister. She will be safe here." Anaya nodded, though her lips pressed tightly as if she still wasn't sure. She stood close to him, almost as though she had decided to trust him for now. The doctor came quickly. After a brief check, he explained, "The girl is weak due to lack of nutrition. Severe dehydration and exhaustion. But don't worry, we'll stabilize her." Hearing this, Anaya finally let out the breath she had been holding. Relief washed over her little face, though her eyes still carried worry. Arjun listened carefully, then said with authority, "Give her whatever treatment she needs. I'll handle the expenses." The doctor nodded respectfully. The staff moved quickly, placing Mira on a bed, attaching fluids, and checking her vitals. Anaya watched everything silently, her hands twisting the edge of her faded dress. She had never been inside a hospital like this before. To her, this place felt almost like another world. Arjun stood nearby, observing. He was not used to waiting rooms or hospital corridors. He was used to boardrooms where every second meant money. But here, time slowed down. Every minute felt long as he watched the little girl lying on the hospital bed. After some time, the doctor returned. "She's stable now. She'll need rest and proper food. She should recover in a few days." Arjun nodded. "Keep me updated." Anaya's eyes filled with gratitude, but she didn't know how to put it into words. She turned toward him slowly. "Thank you, sir. You saved her." Arjun felt a strange warmth at her words. Saved her? It didn't feel like that. He had only done what anyone should do. And yet, looking at her small, hopeful face, he realized that maybe not everyone would have stopped. Maybe she was right, maybe, for her, this really was being saved. They sat in the quiet of the hospital corridor for a while. Anaya hugged her knees to her chest, glancing toward the room where her sister rested. Arjun sat beside her, his thoughts drifting. For years, he had believed in strength and independence. He had built his empire by keeping emotions aside. But now, watching a child who had carried burdens far too heavy for her age, he felt something inside him shift. Finally, he asked softly, "Anaya, do you go to school?" She shook her head. "No, sir. I used to, when Mama was here. But after we lost her, there was no way. I had to take care of Mira." Her voice was steady, but her eyes clouded with memories she didn't share. Arjun leaned back in his chair. He rarely spoke about his own past to anyone, but tonight, a thought crossed his mind: how different would his life have been if someone had asked him the same question when he was young? He didn't speak it out loud, but in his heart, he knew he too had faced loneliness once. It was a memory buried deep, one he had hidden under layers of ambition. Perhaps that was why this moment felt so close to him, why these children touched a part of his heart he thought was long gone. Anaya looked at him suddenly. "Sir, will they really let Mira stay here? They won't ask us to leave?" Arjun's voice was firm. "She will stay here until she's fully well. I promise you." Her eyes searched his face, as if testing his words. Slowly, she nodded, finally letting herself believe. The night grew deeper. The hospital corridor was quiet except for the sound of footsteps and machines. Arjun sat there, strangely calm. His phone buzzed with messages and calls, but for the first time, he ignored them. Business could wait. This moment felt more important. Anaya, tired from the long day, leaned against the chair. Her small body curled up, her eyes closing slowly. Within minutes, she was asleep. Arjun looked at her, her face peaceful despite the hard life she carried. Something stirred inside him, an unfamiliar sense of responsibility, almost like a silent vow. He stood up, removed his coat, and gently placed it over her shoulders so she wouldn't feel cold. Then he walked toward the window, looking out at the city lights. The city had always seemed like his kingdom, a place he controlled. But tonight, he realized it was also a place where children like Anaya and Mira struggled silently, unseen by those who lived in tall glass towers like his. And for the first time, he wondered, perhaps success wasn't only about wealth or power. Perhaps it was also about how much good one could do for those who had nothing. He didn't have all the answers yet. But he knew one thing: the moment he opened that trunk, his life had begun to change. As the night went on, Arjun stayed there in the hospital. The CEO who had once kept his distance from the world was now sitting quietly, watching over two little girls he had just met. And in the stillness of that moment, a part of his heart he thought was gone began to return. The next morning, sunlight poured gently through the tall windows of the hospital. The city outside had already awakened, busy with its usual rush, but inside the quiet hospital room time seemed slower. Mira lay peacefully on the bed, her small chest rising and falling steadily. Her face looked less pale than the night before, thanks to the fluids and medicine. Anaya sat beside her, still holding her hand, her head resting against the bed frame. She hadn't slept much, her eyes swollen from keeping watch through the night. Arjun stood at the doorway, silently observing the two sisters. His usually sharp expression had softened. Something about their closeness, the way Anaya never let go of her sister's hand, reminded him of a part of himself he rarely thought about anymore. He remembered being a boy, left alone for hours in a small, dark room while his parents worked endlessly. He remembered the hunger, the silence, the loneliness. It wasn't the same as what these girls were facing, but the ache of being unseen felt strangely familiar. The doctor walked in, checking Mira's charts. "She's responding well," he said. "With proper food and rest, she'll recover. But she needs care after discharge. Nutrition, hygiene, a safe place to live." The words lingered in the air. A safe place. Arjun knew these children didn't have one. Their shelter had been an abandoned car. Anaya looked up nervously. "Doctor, will you let us stay until she's better? We don't have anywhere else to go." The doctor glanced at Arjun, almost as if passing the responsibility to him. Arjun stepped forward, his voice steady. "You'll stay as long as needed. Don't worry about the cost." Anaya's eyes widened. She wanted to ask more, but her lips only trembled with a soft thank you. Later that day, Arjun returned to his office. His assistant placed files on the table, talking about meetings, deals, and deadlines. But his mind kept drifting back to the hospital. The image of the little girl lying weakly in that trunk haunted him. And the sound of Anaya's words, "She's too weak to beg," echoed in his mind. During a meeting, one of his business partners was explaining numbers, but Arjun barely listened. He kept thinking, how many other children are like them, unseen and unheard in the city? For years, his only goal had been growth, profit, expansion. But now, sitting in a room full of men in suits, he felt something missing. What good was success if it didn't touch the lives of those who needed it most? That evening, instead of going home, he drove straight back to the hospital. Anaya was there, trying to feed her sister soup from a tray. Mira's eyes were half open, weak but awake. When she saw Arjun, she blinked slowly, as though recognizing him. "She smiled at you," Anaya said softly, her own face lighting up. Arjun felt a warmth he couldn't explain. It wasn't the pride of winning a deal or signing a contract. It was something purer, something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of connection. He pulled up a chair beside them. "How are you feeling, Mira?" he asked gently. Her small voice whispered, "Better." Anaya quickly added, "She's stronger today because of the medicine. And, because you helped." Arjun shook his head lightly. "It's not just me. You saved her, Anaya. If you hadn't protected her, she wouldn't have survived." Anaya looked down shyly, unsure how to respond. The next few days passed slowly. Arjun began visiting the hospital every evening. At first, he told himself it was only to check the progress. But soon, he realized it was more than that. He wanted to be there. He brought food sometimes, toys other times, though the girl seemed more interested in his company than the gifts. Anaya began asking him questions about why the city was so big, about what he did in his office, about why people ignored children on the streets. Her innocent curiosity made him think about things he had long taken for granted. One evening, Anaya asked, "Sir, when you were small, did you also have someone who cared for you like you care for us now?" The question caught him off guard. He paused for a long moment before replying. "Not always, Anaya. I had to take care of myself most of the time." She nodded as if she understood completely. That simple exchange touched him deeply. It was as though this little girl had seen through the layers of his life and found the truth he never spoke. By the end of the week, the doctor declared that Mira could be discharged soon. Anaya's happiness was clear, but there was also worry in her eyes. She asked Arjun quietly, "Where will we go after this?" Her question struck him harder than he expected. She wasn't asking for money or gifts, she was asking for a place in the world, for safety, for belonging. That night, Arjun couldn't sleep. He lay awake in his large, empty home. Every corner of his house was filled with luxury, yet it felt hollow compared to the warmth he had seen in those sisters' small, fragile bond. Finally, he sat up in bed and admitted to himself what he had been avoiding: he didn't want to walk away from them. He didn't just want to pay their bills and leave. He wanted to be part of their lives. The next morning, he returned to the hospital early. Anaya was brushing Mira's hair gently with her fingers. They both looked up when he entered. Arjun cleared his throat, almost nervous for the first time in years. "Anaya, Mira, how would you feel if you stayed with me? In my home. You'll have food, clothes, and a safe place. And you can go to school." The girls stared at him, not sure if they had heard correctly. "You mean, with you? In your house?" Anaya asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," Arjun replied firmly. "With me." Anaya's lips trembled. She looked at her sister, then back at him. "But why? We are nobody, sir. Why would you want us?" Arjun knelt so his eyes were level with hers. "Because once, I was also like you, alone and unseen. I know what it feels like. And I don't want you to feel that way again. Tears finally spilled from Anaya's eyes, though she quickly wiped them with the back of her hand. She nodded slowly. If Mira can go to school, if she can be safe, then yes. In that moment, something shifted inside Arjun completely. The walls he had built around his heart for years finally broke. As he left the hospital with the two girls, the world outside seemed brighter. For the first time, he wasn't just a CEO walking through life with power and wealth. He was something else, something greater. He was becoming a guardian. And though he didn't know what challenges lay ahead, he felt ready to face them. Because he wasn't alone anymore. The car moved slowly toward Arjun's home. For the first time, the back seat wasn't filled with business files or important documents, it was filled with life. Anaya and Mira sat close together, their small hands interlocked. Their eyes darted out the window as tall buildings and bright shops passed by. For them, this was not just a car ride, it was a journey into a completely new world. Arjun sat quietly, watching them through the rear-view mirror. His thoughts were unsettled, but not in the way they used to be before a big deal. This was different. He was not worried about profit or loss, he was thinking about how two little girls would fit into his carefully structured life. Would they be comfortable in his house? Would they trust him fully? Would they be happy? When the car finally stopped, the gates of his grand mansion opened slowly. The house stood tall, surrounded by gardens and glowing lights. To anyone else, it was a symbol of wealth and success. But to Anaya and Mira, it looked almost like a palace. Anaya's eyes grew wide. She whispered softly to her sister, "Look, Mira, it's bigger than anything we've seen." Mira, still weak but recovering, leaned against her sister and whispered back, "It looks like a dream." Arjun stepped out first and held the door open for them. "Come," he said gently. "This is your home now." The girls stepped out cautiously, their small feet touching the smooth marble of the driveway. They clung to each other, unsure of how to behave in such a place. Inside, the house was filled with soft light, tall ceilings, and elegant furniture. But what caught the girls' attention wasn't the luxury, it was the warmth of it. For the first time, they didn't feel like outsiders standing on the edge of the world. They felt like they belonged, even if only a little. The staff, surprised to see children in the mansion, looked at Arjun with questions in their eyes. But his firm glance told them everything: these children were not guests, they were part of his family now. That night, a room was prepared for them. Fresh clothes were laid out, and a soft bed was made with care. Anaya touched the blanket, amazed at its softness. She turned to Arjun, unsure if she was allowed to lie down. "Go ahead," he said, his voice kind. "This bed is yours now." Tears filled Anaya's eyes. She whispered, "We've never had a bed of our own." Arjun stood at the doorway, silently watching as the two sisters curled up together under the blanket. He realized then that his mansion, despite all its beauty, had always been empty. Tonight, for the first time, it felt alive. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, the girls adjusted to their new life. Mornings began with breakfast at the large dining table, where Anaya carefully helped Mira eat. The staff learned to smile more, drawn to the innocence of the children's laughter. Even the house itself seemed warmer, as though it had been waiting for their presence. Arjun's routine changed too. Instead of diving into work from dawn till midnight, he began spending time with the sisters. He listened to Anaya's endless questions, helped Mira with her drawings, and even laughed at their small jokes. The cold, distant CEO who once lived only for business was slowly transforming into someone who understood love, care, and family. One evening, as the sun set, Anaya sat beside him in the garden. "Sir," she began hesitantly, "why are you so kind to us? You don't even know us." Arjun looked at her, his voice quiet. "Because once, I needed kindness too. And no one gave it to me. I don't want you to feel what I felt. Anaya thought about his words, then smiled softly. Then we are lucky. Because now, we have you. Those words stayed with him. They weren't spoken with expectation, but with genuine gratitude. And in that moment, Arjun realized that he wasn't just helping them, they were helping him too. They were healing the emptiness he had carried for years. A few months later, both girls were enrolled in school. Anaya was eager, full of curiosity, while Mira, though shy, showed great talent in drawing and writing. Every day, they came home with stories to share, their laughter echoing through the halls. Arjun would listen patiently, sometimes surprised at how much joy he found in their small achievements. A perfect deal used to give him satisfaction. Now, a simple smile from Mira or a clever question from Anaya gave him more happiness than any contract ever had. One evening, during dinner, Anaya looked up at him and asked, "Can we call you something else instead of sir? It feels too far." Arjun paused, touched by the request. "What would you like to call me?" Anaya looked at her sister, then back at him. With a shy smile, she said, "Can we call you uncle?" Arjun's heart softened. He nodded. "Yes. You can call me uncle." From that day onward, the word echoed in the house, filling it with warmth. Each time they said it, it reminded him that he was no longer alone in his world of glass walls and empty rooms. Seasons changed. The garden bloomed with flowers, and the house was often filled with the sound of laughter. The neighbors noticed the difference too. The once distant CEO was now seen walking in the park with two little girls holding his hands, smiling more than anyone had ever seen him smile. Arjun's business partners were surprised as well. He was still sharp and successful, but now he spoke often about responsibility, about giving back to society. Inspired by his own experience, he started a foundation to help homeless children find education and shelter. When asked why he had changed, he only said one line, "Because someone once told me, she's too weak to beg." And that sentence changed everything. Years later, the memory of that night never faded. Anaya grew into a bright young woman with dreams of becoming a teacher, so she could guide children like herself. Mira, gentle and artistic, dreamed of being an illustrator, turning her drawings into stories. Through it all, Arjun remained by their side not just as their guardian, but as family. He guided them, supported their dreams, and celebrated their achievements. And sometimes, when he sat quietly in the evening, he would look back at that one moment, the moment he stopped on a lonely street and listened to a little girl's trembling words. "Sir, she's too weak to beg." He realized then that life had given him many chances to earn wealth, but this was the first time life had given him a chance to earn love. And that love had changed not only the lives of two abandoned children, but his own soul as well. His mansion was no longer just a house. It was a home. A place filled with laughter, learning, and hope. A place where broken lives had found healing, and where a man who once thought he had everything discovered what truly mattered. The world still saw him as a powerful CEO. But to Anaya and Mira, he was something greater. He was the man who chose to stop, who chose to care, and who became the family they never thought they would have. And for Arjun, that was the greatest success of all.